I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, and I served 8 years as treasurer of the Cherokee Nation. And I know a lot of attendees today are working directly within tribes, and that's what my focus today is on, is what is the practical knowledge and examples that you need to know to do your job best, to prepare best for the changes that are coming. There's a lot of topics that we're going to talk about today that aren't exactly here yet, but they will be here before we know it. So I want to make sure that you are as prepared as you possibly can be. Okay, but before we get started, let's do a little disclaimer, because a lot of this is perspective, and we're going to be talking about tax, legal, and professional advice. This is education today. So professional advice occurs when you pay a qualified professional to look at your situation and render advice. And sometimes using education without qualified professional advice can be an expensive mistake. So I just want to disclaim and make sure that everyone is aware that, a lot of what we're talking about, like I said, is based on the laws directly. We haven't seen regulations for a lot of things that I'm going to be talking about. So, some of the ideas that I'm going to be throwing at you are hypothetical and sort of drawing upon my own personal experiences within these particular realms, where I think that you all should be aware that this could be, something you need to be mindful of in the future. So today we're going to focus on 2 acts. The first one is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and the second one is the Genius Act. And I chose these 2 because they're obviously some of the, 2 pieces of signature legislation coming out of the Trump administration. And these are truly going to be foundationally changing finance, accounting, the way that money flows, and economic impacts for these are stage setting for the next few years of the Trump administration. And so I think we all need to be aware of what specific aspects within these 2 bills are. And since I'm a roll up my sleeves kind of gal, there's a few aspects of these bills where I've actually, tried my hand at opportunity zones, tried my hand at cryptocurrency. So I'll kind of tell you a little bit about what I know about these from my own personal experiences. And so knowing these 2 laws and the crossovers that they will have with tribes will put you way ahead of the curve. And my goal today is to give you an overview of these so that you can have that basic understanding and do that deeper dive later on if you need to or want to. Okay, so in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is where we'll start first, we're going to focus on 4 aspects. And I know there's other aspects of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that directly apply to tribes. This is a 331-page act, but we're going to focus on these 4 acts, or these 4 aspects. We're going to focus on opportunity zones, tips and overtime, 1099 changes, and Trump accounts. So the first thing we're going to talk about is opportunity zones. So opportunity zones were first created in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2016. So in Trump's first administration, his landmark, equivalent of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And in that, opportunity zones were created. And an opportunity zone, I'm trying to really, make this concept very simple on both sides of the coin here, but an opportunity zone is a state designated census tract that is selected to attract private investment to create jobs and business growth. And so what this means is that at the state level, this is the governor and or his or her designee that are selecting these census tracts. And I know there's a lot of Oklahoma tribes on the line today. And so, how it worked back in 2016 is that Governor Fallin worked with a lot of tribes to ensure that that those census tracts that the tribes wanted to put forward to help attract this private investment were included in her designations of census tracts. I know there's other states represented on the call today too. Some states had a similar collaborative effort from their governors Other tribes were located in states where their governors didn't connect or coordinate with them at all. So that's why I think it's really important right now, because we're coming up on the next designation, which I'll talk about here in a minute, and so that you're prepared and you know exactly how to advocate to attract this type of investment. Because the second piece of this is because, like I said, attracting that investment, because there is incentives for these investors. And the whole purpose of this provision is to stimulate economic growth in areas that need it while incentivizing these investors. So these investors put their capital gains profits into qualified opportunity zone funds that invest in these areas, and they in turn get these special tax breaks for keeping their money there long term, where they defer their taxes and potentially eliminate taxes on capital gains. So there's significant tax benefits for investors that are seeking to invest in opportunity zones. I actually created my own opportunity zone fund back in 2017. I incurred some capital gains and created an opportunity zone fund, and then merged that fund with a larger fund that had better administration and was able to make the types of investments that I wanted to make that were in tribal communities as well as non-tribal communities that were investing in, futuristic technologies and the things that will make things better on humans in general. And so, like I said, the goal that I want you all to be aware of most of is that we do want opportunity zones designated on tribal lands, and we want to be able to attract investors to invest within our reservations. And so let's go to the next slide. So these are the updates from the past opportunity zones. So a lot of people who know opportunity zones knew it the way that it was. Well, the way that it was is not the way that it is going forward. And there's actually some great new updates that will make things easier and better for tribes. And so every 10 years, there is a redesignation of opportunity zones. And the next determination date is July 1st of 2026, with that new designation taking effect January 1 of 2027. And those designations of those census tracts, like I said, brought forward by the governor, will last 10 years from the application start date. The eligibility has changed. There's some updated income and poverty tests, and the prior contiguous tract add-on was repealed. And there are still state caps. So the governors can't designate the whole state. Let's say the whole state was, technically qualified to be an opportunity zone. They can only designate 25% of those eligible tracts. And then, so continuing on with some updates, there have been these rural opportunity zone accelerators that have been included in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on each of these, but I just kind of want you to understand, because a lot of Indian country is rural, that there are additional incentives to attract investment. So this helps us and helps us to be more attractive. So there's a 50% substantial improvement in opportunity zones, and I'll give you an example on the next slide of what that could be. There's qualified rural opportunity funds where the investors get an additional increase in their basis. And then the applicable start date for original use was updated and is now tied to the new start date for the newly designated zones. So, and I think for purposes of this, I think it's important to understand that the definition of rural is cities and towns with populations of less than 50,000. And they are not in contiguous urbanized areas. And so an example of one of these rural accelerants, and because I know that, here in the Cherokee Nation, there is a rural hospital that has struggled and has gone under. But if we were to attract investment, right, what we could do is attract an investor to acquire that building. Let's say that building was an $8 million building, and under the new rules, the improvement threshold is only 50%. So they would only need to improve that building $4 million versus 100% versus $8 million to qualify. So like I said, these rural accelerants can really get layered in to make these very attractive investments for investors to place their capital. And here's what I think we should be doing right now. So tribal engagement with states, because right now is the time to get started on influencing those 2026 designations. And I think that it's important that tribes think about this internally as to, what are those qualifying tracts within our lands that have shovel-ready project sites that can attract investors. And so, that data-driven package, I think we need to sort of, if we're going to ask for something, we sort of need to prove it and say, well, here's some examples of opportunities within this census tract where we can really get the most bang for the buck for the state and develop these opportunity zones in the way that's intended, right? Submitting that prioritized list of those census tracts and being strategic about the development that you want within those tracts around the healthcare, the housing, the logistics and transportation, the roads, the rail, the water that is going through, so that you can help drive and direct this. Because one thing that I think is sort of the other side of this coin is that, if you are designated as an opportunity zone, there is potential for you to sort of lose control over what kind of investment goes there, right? So I think it's really important that, tribes take that sovereign approach and be involved in these decisions, so that you aren't attracting businesses that you don't want there, that you're attracting businesses that you do want. And existing OZs can be renominated, and many should be. There's lots of opportunity zones within the state of Oklahoma that have done really well and should be renominated, because they are examples of success. And I know that there are existing OZs all over the country that have really done what the intent of the law meant to do. And so just FYI, if you have one already, that is okay to renominate, and the governor can do that. Here in the state of Oklahoma, I do know that previously the Oklahoma Department of Commerce had managed this on behalf of Governor Fallin. We don't have any update yet as to who exactly will be taking on OZs for the state of Oklahoma. So with that, I'm going to pause on OZs and let's go to a polling question.
As a reminder, if you need CPE credit, you would answer the polling questions with your first and last name showing in your Zoom window so that we can allocate that answer to your account. Give everyone about 20 more seconds to get in before we close it. Last call. All right, back to you, Lacey. Thank you.
Well, I hope everyone got that right. Looks like we're 100% there. So good job, everyone. Can I minimize this? Okay, I just minimized that on the screen. All right, so now let's shift to some of the tax updates in the One Big Beautiful Bill. Whoops. Let me try again. All right. So we've heard a lot in the news about no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. And so I've named this slide temporary, mostly no tax on tips. So I think that's a little bit more accurate. But this is a provision that is in effect currently in 2025 through 2028, where individuals can deduct up to $25,000 of qualified cash tips. Now, there is an income phase out for 150,000 single, 300,000 married filing jointly. But your employees, because we have a lot of, casino employees, spa employees, restaurant staff that, accept these cash tips, they need to know that these deductions lower their personal income, not their paycheck. So what will happen is their W-2 will include total cash tips plus their occupation. So this is a new entry that will go into your payroll system. So if you're the CFO, treasurer, controller, payroll clerk for your tribe, for your casino, you need to make sure that your payroll software is being updated with this new entry so that this will appear on the W-2. FICA treatment is unchanged. And for those occupations, the IRS has published a proposed list of customarily tipped occupations. And, you can just Google that. There's 68 occupations across various sectors that they have put out for comment. And the comments are due today. So if you don't mind scrolling through that and making sure that, there's nothing on there that you think is missing. It's important that you get those comments in today, but they're also putting out, for comment, what counts as qualified tips. So, just know that this is a compliance measure that you're going to have to lay in before the end of the year. And then you want to communicate with your staff. You want to train supervisors to understand, because lots of employees will have questions and may wonder, how they're going to take advantage of this, no tax on tips. And then we're going to talk about no tax on overtime next. So again, temporary, mostly no tax on overtime. And again, individuals can deduct up to 12,500 or 25,000 joint of FSLA required overtime pay. So there's, specific, restriction, limits and restriction on what type of overtime we're talking about here. And again, employees need to know that this is a personal tax deduction, not a change in their pay or withholding. And another entry that will need to be added to W-2s is total qualified overtime. So again, working with your payroll system, your payroll provider, to make sure that those entries are updated and that you will be in compliance at year end when you issue those W-2s. FICA is still the same. And yep, so configure the reporting. But yeah, I just really think that, a year-end communication that goes out at year-end, telling your employees exactly how to take advantage of these, personal tax deductions, would be really helpful to them as well. All right. And the final tax compliance measure that I want you to know about in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is 1099 reporting. So, currently the threshold for 1099s is $600. And again, I just want to be mindful of the dates here, right? Because we were seeing 2025 through 2028 on the tax and overtime. In 2026, the threshold for 1099 reporting will increase to $2,000, and then it will index for inflation from 2027 and on. So you will want to make sure that in 2026 that your vendor and AP systems are updated with those new thresholds. And please, please, please keep up with your W-9 discipline, because I've seen a lot of tribes get audited on their 1099s, and a lot of that could be remedied if they just had better W-9 discipline. So just putting in a plug there to, stay on top of that. And so let's go to our next polling question, please.
We've got almost everyone, but we'll leave the polling question up just a little bit longer if you need to click in. All right, we've ended that polling question and we're ready when you are.
The next new aspect of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act where I see a lot of opportunity for tribes is in the new Trump accounts. And I just want to be very clear that, the implementing regulations and custodian lists have yet to be issued on this. And so, we're sort of talking prospectively just based upon, how the law reads. If you want to dive into Trump accounts, it starts on page 109 of the PDF of the law. But this could be a really good opportunity to invest in our youth. These are going to be custodial, pre-age 18 investment accounts that are treated, and I say kinda like traditional IRAs. I think that's sort of the easiest approximation. But these are federally created and administered accounts that are meant to invest only in broad index funds, S&P 500 or similar US equity index with low fees before age 18. Annual contribution limit pre-18 is $5,000 annually. And then that will be indexed for inflation after 2027. No early distributions except for rollovers. And here's where I see a big opportunity for tribes. So funding these Trump accounts. So again, for all of our under 18 population, how might tribes as tribes and as employers help? So there will be a $1,000 federal seed. This is just a pilot program for children born between 2025 and 2028 via election paid directly into the child's Trump account. There is also the ability for general funding contributions. And Indian tribal governments are explicitly named in the law on page 113 as eligible to contribute to children's Trump accounts. And so are 501c3s. So I know that a lot of tribes have internal 501c3s. I also know that a lot of tribes partner with 501c3s. And so the way that a tribe or a 501c3 would contribute to a children's Trump account would be to contribute to a defined class, such as all children born in 2026, right? So, they call that a qualified class in the law. And then the next way is through employer contributions. And this is on page 115 of the law, but up to $2,500 per year per employee is excluded from income under a Section 128 plan. So the Section 128 plan, Section 128 is within the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, but there's these ways to get money into these accounts where I think tribes should be prepared, because you will probably have employees that want to make these tax deductible contributions into their children's Trump accounts going forward in future years. And so again, there's still a lot to watch on this. We haven't, like I said, seen the custodians named for this yet, and don't really know exactly how they're going to roll this out, but this is just at face what the law is saying and some of my ideas and based explicitly on verbiage of the law on how tribes can meaningfully participate in this. So wrapping up the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, what are our action steps? So, back to opportunity zones, you want to build that tribal project map and nominate your census tracts and be ready to brief the governor's office on why you're seeking to nominate these specific tracts, and decide whether to organize or to partner with qualified opportunity zone funds or qualified rural opportunity zone funds. The second action step is on your payroll and AP. You want to, make note of those additional W-2 fields and make sure that, that's within your payroll system, as well as being prepared for next year for the 1099 thresholds changing. You want to train your staff and update employees on how they're going to take advantage of those tax benefits. And then Trump accounts, simply just watch for updates and consider ways that you may want to contribute or partner with other organizations to get some contributions into children's accounts. So with that said, that sort of wraps it up. Before we go into the next slide, let's see, do we have time to take just a couple of questions, or should I just keep going? What do we think here?
No, this is a very natural break for a couple of questions related to the Big Beautiful Bill Act. If there are any questions, feel welcome to submit them in the chat. But to revisit opportunity zones, is there anything that an entity can do to be considered for opportunity zones outside of just communicating directly with the governor's office, or is that really the mode to get that ball rolling?
Yeah, they're the decision maker on the census tracts that they will nominate up to Treasury to be designated as opportunity zones.
And for Trump accounts, can tribes do anything to establish those accounts for the tribal youth, or do those accounts have to be established by the individual's parent or guardian?
So that is still yet to be determined. They're going to so there will be custodians, right? So I'm sure they will probably have certain banks that will be nominated as custodians, but these are federal accounts, and so you can't. Let's say the tribe wanted to go to Schwab and say, we want to open up 500 accounts for 500 children in our tribe, and these are all Trump accounts. You can't do that. So we're still waiting on the regs. So in an abundance of caution, I would just wait until we know more so that we're not getting out of line or jumping the gun on that.
No other questions at this time, Lacey.
Awesome. All right, well, let's keep this going. So watch this after, because I think it'll help you sort of make some sense. And there's some statements that are made in this video, and I know that we're not going to hear it, so I'm just going to kind of speak to these. But President Trump starts this video and he says, this is the greatest revolution since the internet. And I know that's a really big statement, but I somewhat agree with that, because I do think that this is the legislation that changes payments in globally, from here on, right? Because cryptocurrency has been around for, a decade and a half at this point, and a lot of people know about Bitcoin. A lot of people, have dipped their toe into cryptocurrency and have bought Bitcoin. And a lot of people have bought stablecoins as well, but there's never been any, sort of, regulation. This has been just a wild, wild west. And in this video, they make a statement that, currently stablecoins are used for two things: international payments and crime. And that's a truth as well, right? So, because payments can be made in seconds versus when we think of traditional banking that, can take days, a wire, takes time to settle. You can't bank on the weekends, right? stablecoins and cryptocurrencies have been used for 24/7, 365 payments. And also, stablecoins have been used for crime. And so, going further into this video, they speak to the US dollar and how European countries are concerned about stable coins. And so this move of the Genius Act is really a move to try to continue the dominance of the US dollar, because stable coins are cropping up. Central bank digital currencies are being implemented in countries around the world. And so this is the United States' way of trying to establish dominance within the cryptocurrency industry, within stablecoins. And so let's look up underneath the hood of what this Genius Act does. And I will again try to give you some hypotheticals and also some real life examples of what this actually means. So again, well, here's what we're going to learn: what the new federal stablecoin law does, how it will change banking, treasury, and investing for tribes, and practical steps for tribal leaders, treasurers, and tribally owned banks. Okay, so what is a payment stablecoin? So it's a dollar-pegged digital token designed for payments and settlements. And the issuer must redeem one token for a fixed amount of money, usually $1. So we have one stablecoin to $1 ratio. And you won't see the same level of volatility like you would see in other cryptos like Bitcoin. And it's, stable coins are not legal tender, and they're not FDIC insured. They're not a security or a commodity under the act. And this does not apply to other blockchain technologies or cryptocurrencies. However, Genius Act compliant stablecoins will be based on blockchains. And blockchains, I think the simplest way to describe them is they are their own system of accounting, because they are digital ledgers that store information in a way that is immutable, and it is a way that is linked in order across a network, so that the information on that blockchain can be accessed and is transparent from anywhere in the world. And so I just want to sort of differentiate that, stable coins are different than Bitcoin, but also stablecoins and Bitcoin are based upon a blockchain accounting system. So what the Genius Act does is it does a couple of things. It says who can issue, and then what do those issuers have to do? So who will those issuers be? As we seek to rein in the wild, wild west, because previously there's been a lot of issuers. Like I said, stable coins are not a new thing. We've had them in existence for a while. What there has not been is any regulation on who can issue a stable coin and what a stable coin actually has to entail from a transparency, from an asset-backed standpoint. And so what the Genius Act will do is it sets the framework for approving permitted payment stablecoin issuers, so these PPSIs. And who will they be? They will be banks. They will be non-banks. I think about Disney, right? Because Disney, back whenever you used to go to the parks, back in the 80s, you could buy Disney dollars. And so they've been doing Disney bucks, and there's lots of approximations for ways to hand over your cash and get something in return. But you will see entities outside of banks that will apply to be these stablecoin issuers. This is meant to be, what they're meant to have is a full reserve model with specific safe assets and strict monthly transparency. And sort of contrasting that with banks that only have to have partial reserves. They have to have full 100%. So if you deposit $100 in your bank, they only have to have a portion of that available to you. But in this case, they have to have full $100 sitting aside in safe assets, and I'll discuss those on the next slide. They're strict marketing rules that are meant to prevent fraud. So you can't issue a stable coin and name it US government stablecoin or similar names that are, sort of intended to mislead people. They have to have Banking Secrecy Act and anti-money laundering obligations, and they also have the technical ability to comply with this act. So in regulating those issuers, like I said, these will be banks. This is going to be JP Morgan Chase. This is going to be Disney. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency is the one tasked in this law to implement the rules for these issuers. So you're going to have really two sets of regulatory frameworks. You're going to be a federal qualified issuer if you're issuing 10 billion plus of outstanding stablecoins. However, if you're issuing less than 10 billion, then you can qualify under a state qualified issuer. So the state of Oklahoma will likely have a stablecoin issuer framework. The state of Wyoming, right? And you will see states having to follow the federal regulations because their regulations have to look like the federal. However, you will see some states sort of jockey to be, the most stable coin friendly state that there possibly could be, right? So they're going to customize their state regulations to become issuer friendly. So, I spoke to the reserve rules, what backs the token. So the one-to-one reserves, and you can see that list that I have there. But, and if you work in Treasury at your tribe, these are a lot of assets that you already hold. I mean, you probably keep your cash and your grants in a lot of these securities or similar type securities, but this is what every stablecoin issuer will have to back their stablecoins one-to-one. And then in the law, there's lots of provisions for transparency, redemption, and the no yield rule. So this is a lot of fun. So since the focus of the Genius Act is the consumer protection, because again, we don't have any consumer protection. I mean, you have some stablecoin issuers that say, well, we released our audits and here's what our reserves are backed. But I mean, those aren't, subject to any level of scrutiny that is federal law. And so they're going to have to publish monthly reserve composition plus CEO, CFO certification. They're going to have an examination by a registered public accounting firm with annual audits. And they're going to have very clear, timely redemptions and fees disclosed with less than 7 days notice. And the most interesting piece of this is that issuers cannot pay the interest or the yield to holders just for holding that coin. The issuers earn the interest. So, I'm just going to go back to this slide. Like I said, a lot of tribes keep their cash reserves, treasury reserves in these assets, and they're, making, 3 to 5% of interest at this point in time. And you get to keep that interest. However, for these issuers, they cannot pay a yield to you. They earn that yield. So that's sort of their delta on profitability. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And also, I know that this is a point of contention in in Congress right now with some potential flaws of this act, because while they can't pay a yield, can Disney give you, a reward for using or spending their stable coins? It looks like they can. So it looks like there's some loopholes in this law. And the stablecoin law is just a precursor to what will be a larger cryptocurrency regulatory law that we will see in the future. So how does Genius change banking for tribes? And so this is going to create these full-time payment rails, like I said, 24/7 settlement for vendor payments potentially, faster, cheaper than wires or ACH, programmable disbursements via smart contracts. So, you have a disaster that happens, well, you can immediately send stable coins to a wallet upon location verification to a citizen within that disaster area. Per capita payments sent directly to wallets instead of mailing checks. I know there's a lot of tribes out there that mail a lot of checks and get a lot of them back. So there's going to be a lot of programmable ways to implement stablecoin payments in the future. However, again, they're not FDIC insured, so you have to do your operational due diligence on the issuer, custodian, and your wallet controls. So not only completely changing payments, you will also see, you know, some skeptics in this, right? So I am still skeptical. Why would my tribe hold XYZ's bank stablecoin tokens, right? Again, if you're seeking that operational efficiency, if you're needing a way to make 24/7 payments, then there is going to be a real use case for stablecoin tokens. Maybe your casino wants to advertise, we accept XYZ Bank stablecoin tokens. I mean, there's going to be all kinds of reasons to use this, but then there's going to be a lot of reasons to not buy into stablecoins because the underlying assets themselves are pretty similar to what you already hold, like I said, and you're not earning any yield. So it's going to be a cost benefit analysis. However, there is an opportunity and a path for tribes that own or want to own banks that you can issue the stable coins. So, which regulatory framework would apply, depends on how big your bank is and how much you want to issue. Like I said, the revenue model is there because you earn the interest on those reserves. Plus, you can earn fees on minting, redeeming, and network fees. And you keep the interest and earn those fees. So there's potential profitability in it. And then but again, you're subject to the regulatory aspects. So this is going to be the expense side of things that you have to have strict regulatory controls in this arena. And so the timeline, the effective date of the Genius Act is the earlier of 18 months after the enactment, which is January the 18th of 2027, or 120 days after the final rule from the OCC. So we do know that the OCC the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency is actively working on these. Like I said, this is a big priority of this administration to, implement this law. There is a comment period that is open right now. And I think I have that on the next slide. Yes. So here is the docket for the public comments. So if, like I said, and anyone can comment at this point in time. I do think it's important that tribal banks make comments on this because this law does set the stage for future laws governing cryptocurrency. And it's important that tribal voices are heard. So with that said, this was our talking points for this conversation, and I'm happy to answer any questions on Genius Act.
We've got one that's come in through the chat, Lacey. You mentioned earlier that the stablecoin may be equal to $1. Can the purchasing power change with inflation, whether up or down? And are other countries, for example, India, Japan, are they equal to the US stablecoin, or how does that compare? And then because there's no FDIC insurance, who guarantees that the assets in stablecoin, should your stablecoin get hacked?
Okay, so I think there was like 3 questions in one.
There were.
I think the first answer is purchasing power. I mean, yeah, you could lose or gain purchasing power. Okay. And then the second question was,
The second question, other countries, for example, would it be a 1-to-1, the stablecoin, a US stablecoin versus a stablecoin in another country, or would it be similar to the value of the dollar versus the value of currency in other nations?
That's correct. So if you're buying a US based stable coin, you're going to have a basis in all of those US based assets, right? You're talking treasuries, you're talking repos, you're talking US, and that's, again, like I said, the point is to sort of establish dominance in this area so that, we don't have, dominant stable coins that are backed in other foreign currencies. I'm not getting into the specifics of the foreign reciprocity that is in this law, but I do, ask the questioner to, read this law, because there is some foreign reciprocity for foreign stable coins to be approved for regulation of underneath the US regulatory regime. But yeah, other countries' stable coins will be likely, I would assume, denominated in their national currency. But who knows, that we could win this stablecoin war, and they could be wanting to denominate in U.S. backed securities as well.
And what about, given that there's no FDIC insurance, this isn't backed by the FDIC, what happens if someone's stablecoin is hacked and they're effectively virtually robbed? You lose out?
Well, FDIC insurance is mostly when a bank fails. And so, FDIC insurance, so if your bank account gets wiped out by a hacker right now, that's, not, that's on the bank, right? That's not FDIC insurance, Federal Depository Insurance Corporation. And so, yeah, but it's exactly right. That's why it's really important to do the due diligence on the issuer. It's important to do the diligence on their custody of the underlying assets, right? Because you don't want them to, lose all the US treasuries that are supposedly backing your stablecoins, and also the wallet controls, right? So that is, like I said, there's a whole new world that is forming out there, and it's important to sort of have your, your due diligence mindset if you're implementing any of these aspects.
If we could take a step back and talk more simply about what a stable coin is, if we could revisit that again.
Okay. So I do think it's going to be good for folks to take a look at that video. I think that will be helpful. I think that a stable coin is best conceptualized as like what it's called is, it's called a digital token. So if I have, I know I don't know who else's kid plays Fortnite, right? But they've got these Fortnite V-Bucks, right? Well, that's a one-to-one there. And so, it's digital. It's on a blockchain, but that stable coin is transferable to your wallet, to someone else's wallet. You will be able to see where that stable coin that you had in your wallet goes forever and ever and ever and on, if you know how to view the blockchain. But the tokenization of assets is already happening. You're seeing this happen in real estate. You're seeing, everything will be able to be tokenized. And this is just the concept of the dollar being created into a digital asset. And I know that this is a difficult concept to describe, and I'm probably doing a terrible job at it, but there's probably a lot of videos out there that make this really a lot simpler than how I'm describing it.
Lacey, if you don't mind, if you stop sharing, I'm happy to share the video and we can watch it together.
Let's do that.
We can give it a try. All right, here is the video. And can I get a thumbs up that you can see my screen? Great. All right, here we go.
Is taking hold on Wall Street.
This could be perhaps the greatest revolution in financial technology since the birth of the internet itself.
President Trump is talking about stablecoins. They're a new type of digital token that's pegged to another asset, usually the dollar. Unlike more volatile currencies, their price, in theory, barely fluctuates. Dollar stablecoins have taken off in countries like Turkey and Nigeria, where inflation is high and trust in the local currency is low. In the West, they're largely used either for getting money in and out of more volatile crypto assets or for financial crime. But Trump's Genius Act has paved the way for experimentation in America.
They named it after me.
It confirms that stablecoins are not securities and requires them to be fully backed by safe, liquid assets. This new legal status is giving the coins a boost. Today, there are $285 billion of stablecoins in circulation, around 68% more than a year ago. But some banks expect the market to be worth $2 trillion in 3 years' time. The best use case for them is in payments. Because ownership is registered instantaneously on digital ledgers, stablecoins allow for faster transactions. That is especially valuable for international payments, which could be settled in seconds rather than days. The coins could also cut out the need for middlemen like Visa and MasterCard, who currently process payments. Retail giants like Amazon and Walmart are already considering their own coins to get away from the big card companies. Stocks, bonds, and funds are being tokenized too. Tokenized assets are digital representations of another asset. Like stablecoins, they can make financial transactions faster and easier, which could revolutionize trading and the broader financial system. Despite the promise of speed and security, many European regulators remain skeptical of stablecoins.
Stablecoins are privately issued and notably pose risks to monetary policy and financial stability.
They fear the private stablecoins could displace the public money issued by central banks, which could undermine the ability of institutions like the Bank of England to support the economy. Like countless technologies, the stablecoin revolution could yet come to nothing. But right now, the industry is booming. With the new American regulation, retailers, payments firms, and investment companies are all jumping on board. Skeptics run the risk of being left behind.
And I know we're at time, so I just want to say thank you to everyone. And I'm pretty easy to find. I'll drop my contact information in the chat if you want to reach out and talk about any of these topics or more. I can nerd out on it, but I hope this is a good overview that at least gives you a foundational basis for which to be mindful of these changes that are coming. And as I said, to do your due diligence. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for your time, Lacey. I know that you've got a very busy schedule. This was an immensely beneficial conversation. So we appreciate and value your time. Thank you.